The United States' greatest export is war, a tool that Washington used to keep other countries under its authority. The US is plagued by fears of waning power and influence that embraced the foreign and domestic wars. There has been an overemphasis on military force because the US has the strongest military on earth, and it is believed that it can achieve its international goals that diplomacy cannot achieve, or by military power, it can enforce a diplomatic solution. Washington considers that with its military supremacy, it can force surrender. And in the recent decades, we saw how wars were started in Iraq or Afghanistan to achieve political goals in the name of democracy. And nations were invaded and regimes were changed. The US policymakers and national security experts have this firm belief that its military might is the most powerful tool to achieve diplomatic goals. Recently, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken also stated that Washington would not engage in negotiations until the fighting stops in Ukraine and a similar approach in Gaza. But with military might, results may not be achieved at both war zones. Similarly, the US applied the same approach towards China and displaying its military might in South China Sea and empowering Taiwan with weapons, with a larger target to contain China and Chinese military power. But conflict is getting worse. Both sides are building their firepower. The economic impacts of wars are visible in the US, but Washington knows that it has no alternative than to show its military muscle. There is a moment after the 7th of October when reporters asked Secretary of Treasury Janet Yellen, can the US afford to support two wars, Ukraine and Israel? Her reply without any hesitation was absolutely. America is addicted to wars. Retired Air Force Lieutenant Colonel and history professor in his article has mentioned that when I was in the US military, I learned, attributed to the Greek philosopher Plato, that only the dead have seen the end of the war. And there is no ending to the US wars. With America's unending wars, there is another view that looks rational as well. Neoconservatives, the likes of George Soros, and the military-industrial complex all profit from these conflicts, which is why the US so often stands against peace and ready to initiate new wars. The US's contribution stands at 42% of the total global arms exports, delivering arms to 107 countries, which is more than any other major exporter. Together with the US, Europe accounted for 72% of all arms export in 2019 to 2023, while Europe alone was responsible for 1/3 of global arms exports. Conflicts and wars mean more jobs, more revenue, and economic growth for the United States. The ongoing conflicts in Ukraine, the Middle East, security situation in South China Sea, and anywhere else are driving the defense spending. The US defense industry that largely faced its closure after the Cold War once again revived with these two conflicts in Ukraine and the Middle East. Revived industrial units are now producing out-of-commission Tomahawk missiles, which had been rapidly expended on the airstrikes against the Yemen's Houthis in Red Sea, and some other weapons to track and target non-conventional forces. The Defense News Top 100 reported that the entire US defense sector has seen significant growth, outpacing other industries. The good times aren't likely to end soon either. The defense sector is growing at the rate not seen since the Cold War. Lockheed Martin is at the top of the list with $64.65 billion in defense revenue, and American firms remain the key takers of revenue share. In total, 6 Chinese and 6 British firms were in the top 100 firms. If we look into the facts that who are the biggest importers of American weapons, we can figure out that some of the 30% of the arms transfers went to the Middle East from 2019 to 2023, with the top 3 buyers in the region being Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Egypt. The majority of arms imports by Middle Eastern states were provided by the US, 52%, followed by France and Germany. The biggest importers of weapons during the period 2019 to 2023 remained India, Saudi Arabia and Qatar, followed by Ukraine, which received huge transfers from all Western nations. But the era of American hegemony is coming to an end, and now the US is scrambling to maintain its power. But these are the most difficult times. Why? Because dying superpowers are more dangerous, and without any hesitation can start any new war for its survival.